everyone! I am going to show you how to start centering on a wheel. This is the very first step for learning how to throw on the pottery wheel. Hopefully we'll get a chance to get back to the classroom and you'll get your hand at this. Otherwise, I just still thought that this was an important skill that every Ceramics 1 student should have. So, ready? I already wedged my clay. I've got about a fist size because I'm going to make a small cup or bowl, but I would suggest starting with a little bit smaller chunk of clay. Really wedge that, make sure that you get all of those air bubbles out. Then I kind of like to smack it around a little bit and create somewhat of a mound so that it looks like a mountain. And you're going to try to center it directly on the center of the circle. And I'm going to pound that down or throw it down. And I'm going to use the palms of my hand to push in and down so that's really centered. Sometimes you'll put it on something called a bat, and then you'll put these bat pins and these little dots here, but I don't have that, and so we just gotta be creative. Then I'm gonna make sure that I have a bucket of water and a sponge, and I'm also going to have a needle tool next to me. First thing, I'm going to make sure that I keep my hands pretty moist and wet because you don't want to have too much friction on the clay, and if you do, that will cause it to slip right off of the wheel. Each of the wheels is a little bit different, but I'm going to turn the wheel on and then press on the pedal just like you are driving a car. And I'm going to do it real slow at first to get you an idea. Now you'll notice that my knees are on my elbows are on my knees on my legs, and I'm going to be trying to keep them in that spot to stabilize it. If you're finding that your legs are a little too long or too short to do that, you might need to open up your gait a little bit. But this is a pretty good height for me with this makeshift chair that I have. So what you want to do to center your clay is to make sure that everything going around is at the same dimension so that when we bring it up, there's not an area that's a little bit thicker on one side and an area that's thinner on the other side. This is to ensure that it's going to be what we consider centered, or thickness all the way around, and it's not going to look wobbly. To start, I'm going to use these parts of my hands, and you'll notice that the wheel is going counterclockwise, and so I'm going to use my left hand to kind of push up against that to resist it a little bit, and I'm going to use my right hand to push down. And so here I'm putting this hand up against the clay. I'm going to kind of grasp around it like so. Whoops. And I'm going to, and my hands got a little bit dry, which is why I got a little bit off-centered. I'm going to put my right hand kind of above and just try to push down. Now this wheel is a little bit less bulky and industrial than some of the other ones, which is why it's in my studio, because I was actually able to carry it. And I'm just going to continue to add water right from my sponge onto the clay. Put this up against my clay and put this above. Now if you look closely, you can see here, can you see that my hand is moving out a little bit? That means that there's one part of my clay that's bumping my hand out, causing it to not be centered. So what I really want to do is I'm going to use, again, this part of my hand and push it in. And you almost want to use like your core. And I find that it helps to breathe in and then breathe out. And as I'm breathing out, then I can focus on keeping this hand really firm. You can see that it's not really moving anymore, right? So I want you to try to practice that when you get the chance. And then again, keeping my hand on the top. Sometimes it helps to close your eyes and to kind of just get the feel for it rather than to see it, because sometimes our eyes can deceive us. And once you just have your eyes closed and you can feel, oh, my hand is bumping out, or you can feel just the clay smoothly running through your hands, makes it a little bit easier to really understand. Now you might find that your clay is centered on one part, but not on another part. Say on the bottom it's centered, but on the top it's not. So what you're going to want to do then is keep your hand up against the clay and slowly bring it up. And I'm going to like almost continue with that same pressure till I go all the way up. Now the way that I like to compare this is if you've ever held a baby and it's fallen asleep in your arms, when you are putting it down to sleep, you don't want to wake it up. But it's so used to this comfortable position in your hands that when you release and you do it quickly, that they'll jolt awake. Same with like the clay. You really want to do a slow release and move away from the clay as slowly as possible and almost like as quietly as possible without disruption, without moving your hands quickly from it, because if you do, it can shift the clay slightly. Another way that you can check that your clay is centered is using a needle tool. And I like to hold it in my right hand because I'm right-handed and kind of use my left hand to secure my right hand because I can sometimes be a little bit wobbly, and just use your needle tool to determine if it's making a perfect circle around. Now I knew that my clay was not centered on the top, and I can tell that because I unfortunately can't zoom in, but you can see a little bit on here that there's a line that goes around one side and not the other side. That means that the clay is bouncing off on one side and a little bit closer towards the center of the wheel on the other side. It's not even. So I know that I'm going to have to center this from the bottom up again, but double check that on the bottom, in the middle, and on the top to kind of give you an idea if your clay is centered. The bottom is a little bit more centered than the top, so I'm going to spend some more time and energy trying to center it. It's a lot easier to do it when you're not talking. So I'm going to try to just show you some of those techniques again that I showed you before. Putting again this part of my hand up against the clay, using my core, breathing in and out. Making sure that your hands continue to be moist. Slowly moving your hands up the clay. Making sure that they're staying as sturdy as possible. And then slowly lifting away. All right? I'm going to try that again. This clay has something called grog in it. Grog is like little gritty bits or sand in the clay. Porcelain is an example of clay that is very, very fine and that it's very, very smooth. The reason that we're using clay with grog, and this clay in particular is recycled, that I brought home, is because grog is really good for keeping the structure when you're building, and we're doing a lot of hand building. But as you get more and more used to clay and as you work on the wheel, you might find a clay without so much grog to be a little bit better. So I'm just going to continue to practice my centering from my hand again down, making sure that I'm not moving my finger or my hands. It's not bobbing. If you see your hand bobbing, you know you're not quite centered. All that extra slip you can just put right inside of your water bucket. Grab some more water and continue. Everybody's going to find their own way of working on the wheel and what works best for you in your comfort zone. But I do find that these tidbits are kind of helpful, at least for me. And once your hand is not bobbing back and forth or moving out and in from the center, once you can feel that, once you can observe that, once you can observe that there is a full circle all the way around, which is parallel to your wheel rather than kind of at an angle. You know, if it's at an angle, it's not quite centered. If I have those circles all the way around from the bottom to the top, which it looks like it is so far, and my hand wasn't bobbing, then I know that my clay is centered and I am good to go. So, let me just wipe off my hands real quick and I'll turn off my phone. I hope that you enjoyed that demo.